One, two, three, four.
Hi, folks. This is Ravi Tangri here, and this is the second of the live streams that I'm doing on how do we lead, how do we hold meetings in this pandemic world. And today, I really want to bring out the elephant in the corner about how we work in this environment. Something that's a challenge, but I honestly don't believe people have really sunk their teeth into what's involved here. And there's two reasons for this challenge. And let me get at the first one first. Think about conference calls before all this happened. When you were on a conference call that wasn't yours, what did you do? 9 times out of 10, you probably had it on mute and you were working on your email as you went along. And that's what most people do. People aren't really engaged. It's just something in the background. Think about it. When you had to call on someone in a conference call, what happened? You're asking a question, then there's all sorts of silence. They're like, oh, I'm sorry, I was on mute. Well, yes, you were on mute, but you also had to find the screen and change things so that you could talk, but actually see what was going on. That's the way it's traditionally worked in our organization. And that's one of the key reasons, the challenge of working remotely. When you start working with video conferencing, with meetings and such, it's getting more and more challenging because people are used to, with that sort of thing, with the audio visual, just having it in the background, not really paying attention, half attention. And so that's something that's really got to shift, and you cannot just command it to happen. You've really got to work to start to see how you can support people in learning the new behavior. Because if you just try to force it on top of all the pressures they're feeling, you're going to get a whole lot of resistance, overt and covert, and you'll get all sorts of behaviors that you do not want to get in your organization. So this is part of the challenge now. We're moving to working remotely. If your team is still working, if they're still trying to find their way through, we're moving to working more remotely, which means we have to connect with a computer. We're using video conferencing. Zooms and other services are exploding in terms of what's happening. And in fact, some of these have had to shrink their bandwidth in order to meet the demand. But this is a whole new culture, a whole new way of doing things. So right now I am live streaming. Hi, Christy. Hi, Sophia. I am live streaming both on my Facebook page and on YouTube. If you've got any questions, pop them in here and I can bring them into the conversation. So what I want to address today, the elephant in the corner, is this whole moving to working remotely. How do we actually work remotely? How do we use video conferencing for meetings? How do we use it in terms of sharing information? What information gets shared? And what's your role as a leader in making this happen? What's the demand there? So there's two barriers here. The first is the technology. And as I said, when we video conference, what we're used to is sticking it on mute and working away at our own stuff until we hear our name. Because a lot of times we are asked to come into meetings where you're going, why am I here? Anybody ever had that daily? Okay. And so people generally will tend to try tune out and get other stuff done because they have other things on their plates. Now, the other thing is a lot of people get into, oh, I don't want to be on video. I don't want to be seen. And so that's a whole nother level of discomfort that's there. And you can't just force people and say it's got to be that way. Because if their video isn't on, probably they're going to move into the conference call mode, have it on mute, and be working on other stuff. If the meetings are happening, they need to be purposeful, they need to be tight, and you want to make sure that they're engaged. But in order to get them there, you've got to get them to feel comfortable with it. You need to create maybe some games. What I tend to do is try to create some games, work with little groups, the breakout groups, to do different exercises, find ways to do things so that they become much more comfortable with it. You say, well, look, we've been out of our regular offices for 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks. We can't just take the time. Guess what? If you don't take the time, you're not going to get there. There was a great time management book from the 80s that was called If You Don't Have the Time to Do It Right, Why Will You Have Time to Do It Over? Don't really remember what was in the book, but the title was brilliant. I mean, we say we never have time to do all these things, but we always have time to fix the caca when the mess happens, right? Isn't that true? So this is, if you want to move this way, and we are going to have to keep moving this way and working this way to a significant extent, because even when we come out of isolation, even when we come out of quarantine, the virus isn't gone. It's still there. We are still going to need to socially distance. And if we can work to some extent, at least remotely, we're going to be a whole lot more effective in terms of going. And Palma, no, CSP does not stand for COVID specialized presenter, but it may soon. It's a certified speaking professional, as you know, my friend. And so, first thing is getting people on there. There's a skill set to learn, so you need to create the time and the resources for people to get familiar, to get comfortable with the technology, whatever platform you're using. And they need to know how to work their way around. It's just like learning a new software program. If you get a new word processor, some new software program that manages what you do, there's going to be a learning curve. You need your people to get the proper training so that they understand how to use the technology, where the chat, where the questions, and so on. If you've got large meeting, the hand raise, and so on. The other thing is when you're talking about larger scale meetings, because conferences, meetings have been canceled en masse into the summer, and I've heard some even into the fall. Some of these are events that are, well, we've always said they're necessary. We can't not have them. Information needs to be conveyed. But you can't just take a live event and plug it into your computer. You can't just stick a keynoter on there and have them go for 45 minutes or an hour. Because number one, people aren't going to stay engaged the same as when they have a live person. You probably need to shift the way that information is conveyed. You might need to break it into chunks, break them into breakout groups. This is what I often do with people. And thanks for the feedback, Marcel, saying the mic's muffling. Apologize for that, folks. But you need to find how to use this medium to convey that information. If you want to have larger meetings where you're bringing in expertise, absolutely you can do that, but you need to be able to work. It's much more of a facilitative process. What I often do if I'm speaking is I will break it into chunks and then move into group exercises, or if another keynoter is there, have work with them to do the same thing so that we know that people are engaged. They know they're going to be involved in applying what they've heard so that they're actually going to be present. The other thing that you can do, there's a lot of things like strategic planning, different facilitated processes. Yeah, it's ideal to do it live, but you absolutely can do it online. But again, you need to change the way you do it. And the general rule of thumb is it's going to take a little bit longer to do the same thing. So you need to perhaps weed out and really get to the key bits to fit it in, but also allow that time. If I'm delivering a 3-day management development program, such as I do one at for a university and you're here in the executive development program for senior leaders on how to deal with change. Now they're looking at going online. It's a 3-day program. I am not going to do it 3 days straight. I will break it probably into 6 half days. It's really difficult for people to spend a full day fully engaged on the computer. You need to allow them to break it up. So there's things such as that. So this is all the how do you make it work. You need to get people comfortable with it. You need to train them. You need to change the processes. The other barrier to this about moving to doing things more online comes in the human aspect of it. In my first live stream that I did last week, I talked about this a bit, about how we go through the grief. We're going through the grief curve. We've lost normal. It's not going back there. We don't know what's going to emerge when we emerge from quarantine. So people are grieving all of that, grieving the routines and so on. So you need to be able to support them through this process. There's a lot of the human side of this. As a leader, you've got two roles. There's the task function and there's the relationship function. You have to get the job done, but you've also got to engage and support the people so that they can do the task. If you stay focused on task, especially now, all you're going to do is burn out and disengage your people. You will lose them. If you can support them now, you will build their capability, their resilience to be able to do more as they move forward. So I think right now, rather than trying to just get the job done, just get her done and focus and say, come on, we've got to do this. We're going to have meetings like we did. How do we find a way to be able to support our people emotionally and in terms of abilities to be able to learn these processes so they become as natural as regular meetings. The other thing that there's an opportunity here for, this is what I find when I go into organizations, is people, oh yeah, there's some meetings about this, meetings about, guess what? We've gone weeks without all those meetings. You're going to find out just how important all of these meetings are. So I would encourage you to really, when you're doing a meeting, say, what's the purpose? What's the outcome? Where do we need to get to? What is contributing to that? What's not? To really be clear on that. Now, the final thing I want to get to, Michelle, appreciate this. She's saying, really important in remote meetings is to check in with people first. Find out how they're doing. Some organizations have been operating remotely for many years with staff all over the country, absolutely. And the good leaders facilitating the meetings are aware of connecting authentically rather than rushing straight into an agenda. Recognize the environment is different, but you can still be effective. That's absolutely true, Michelle. I mean, the thing is, there are some organizations, they've worked like this all along. But for most people, I think it's a brand new environment. And you've got to make sure that you've got the support for people going forward. The other thing is you've got to support yourself as a leader. If you are going to be the support for your people, you need to make sure you're addressing your emotional journey. You need to make sure you're dealing with what you're going through so that you can be there to support others. And that's a challenge. If you're a business owner, if you're a senior leader, you support your people, but who's supporting you? You need to make sure you have the right support system, whether it's colleagues in other organizations, significant other, friends, or a coach or a counselor. It's critical that you are supporting yourself through this so that you can process your stuff and be resourceful for your people. And it's interesting, Becky is saying that this is also, it's not just in management, but for school teachers now, because school teachers all over the place are moving to this online learning. as well. It's a whole massive learning curve about how you engage people. It's one thing to engage them in person. It's a whole different ball game here. And so what you've got to make sure, number one, they've got the training and are engaged to be able to be comfortable with it and they're using it. Two, that you're changing the processes, how you do all of these pieces, so that you are making sure it fits the medium, so you're keeping them engaged as they go forward. It's so critical to do that. Otherwise, you're just going to have them muting and going and doing other stuff. And thirdly, to be able to support yourself to do that. I actually think there's a huge opportunity here, and I'm going to do a live stream on that in a week or two, because all these things that we said we can't stop doing, we've had to. So let's really look at what is adding value. Is there a way now, because it's been this disruptive, to reinvent what we do, to find new, more powerful, more effective ways to do it, and to engage our people in that journey? So those are some of the thoughts. If there's anything else that you have, drop them in the comments. I will be checking in on that. The other thing too, I want to mention as well, as a resource for you and for your people, if you want to, I've made during this time my Mindfulness 101 program. Because of what's going on, I've made it completely free to anybody. So you can access that. Please feel free to pass this on. Just go to 2020presence.com, use the coupon code COMMUNITY, one word, and you can get access to that for free. You can pass this on to your people. They can all get access to that for free. Right now, the more we can step out of the stress, the more we can diffuse the anxiety and just get out of that stress response, the more resourceful we're going to be for everybody, for not just for work, at home, in every part of our lives. So please feel free to pass that on. If you would like to chat about this, about how you find your way through this, I'm happy to do to have a Zoom chat with you. Just go to callravi.com, CALLRAVI.com, and let's schedule a virtual coffee and chat for a few minutes about how you find your way through these challenges. Thank you muchly, folks, and we will we'll check in with you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.